A poor woman cried at a grave every Sunday for 5 years, until a black limousine pulled up and a man in an expensive suit stepped out, his eyes narrowing as he spotted her kneeling before the headstone. Rain poured from the Chicago sky, washing her tears away as she whispered words only meant for the dead. Her threadbare coat offered little protection against the autumn chill, yet Andrea Hayes came faithfully each week, clutching the same bouquet of white lilies that her sister had once loved. The cemetery groundskeeper had grown accustomed to her presence, occasionally offering a sympathetic nod as she made her way down the familiar path. Today seemed no different until the sleek vehicle appeared, its engine purring softly as it stopped near Sophia's grave, a marble monument that Andrea could never have afforded on her nurse's salary. She sensed the stranger's presence before seeing him, a prickling awareness raising goosebumps along her rain-soaked skin. The man stood silently behind her for several moments, his breathing barely audible above the patter of raindrops striking stone and soil. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority and unexpected grief. "My wife is here too." Andrea turned, startled by both his words and the intensity of his gaze. Dark eyes that seemed to pierce through her, revealing an unsettling familiarity that made her heart stutter. The stranger's expensive suit contrasted sharply with her modest attire, yet something in his expression transcended their obvious social divide. "I'm Carlo Mancini," he said, extending a hand that bore a distinctive scar across the knuckles. "And you have her face. Exactly her face." His words hung between them, as thunder rolled across the cemetery, nature's dramatic punctuation to an impossible revelation. Andrea's hands trembled as she rose to her feet, rainwater streaming down her cheeks, mingling with fresh tears as recognition dawned. "Sophia never told me she was married," she whispered, the words barely audible as a thunderclap shattered the cemetery's somber silence. Lightning illuminated the sky, casting harsh shadows across Carlo's features as he studied the woman who mirrored his dead wife. "She wasn't just my wife," he replied, his jaw tightening visibly. "She was my salvation. And apparently, she kept secrets from us both." The groundskeeper watched from his shelter as the unlikely pair stood facing each other beside the grave, their silhouettes occasionally illuminated by flashes of lightning that transformed the cemetery into a Gothic tableau. Neither seemed willing to leave despite the worsening storm. Carlo glanced at his watch, a timepiece worth more than Andrea earned in months, and made a decision that would alter both their lives forever. "My driver can take us somewhere dry to talk," he offered, gesturing toward the waiting limousine with its tinted windows concealing armed security. Andrea hesitated, years of caution warring with an overwhelming need to understand the sister who had vanished from her life only to reappear in death. "I don't know you," she replied, clutching her worn purse closer as another lightning bolt split the darkening sky. A droplet of rain clung to Carlo's perfectly trimmed eyelash as he looked down at the flowers she had brought, identical to the arrangement delivered weekly by his own staff. "But you knew Sophia," he countered softly, "and I have a daughter who deserves to know her mother had a twin." The word daughter broke through Andrea's hesitation like sunlight through storm clouds, her medical instincts awakening at the thought of a child caught between these adult complexities. The rain fell harder now, soaking through her thin clothes and chilling her to the bone. Carlo shrugged off his expensive jacket and placed it around her shoulders before she could protest, the warmth of the wool and the lingering scent of expensive cologne surrounding her like a foreign country. "1 hour," he promised, his voice low and persuasive against the storm's backdrop. Andrea nodded almost imperceptibly as she took one final look at her sister's grave, wondering what other secrets lay buried beneath the perfectly manicured grass of Chicago's most exclusive cemetery. She followed Carlo to the waiting car, unaware that her Sunday ritual had just become a dangerous initiation. "I understand that you need the complete story across all chapters. I'll continue with chapters 2 and 3, maintaining the same paragraph length and style while avoiding any names from the prohibited list." The limousine's interior enveloped Andrea in luxury she'd never experienced. Soft leather seats, privacy glass, and the subtle scent of power. Carlo sat opposite her, his phone buzzing constantly with messages he ignored, his attention fixed entirely on the woman with his dead wife's face. Chicago's skyscrapers reflected the storm's fury as they drove in silence, each wrestling with questions too complicated for casual conversation. Andrea studied the man who had somehow become her brother-in-law without her knowledge, noting the hardness in his eyes that softened only when he mentioned his daughter. The car stopped before a towering high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan, doormen rushing forward with umbrellas despite the late hour. Andrea hesitated at the building's ornate entrance, suddenly aware of how out of place her worn shoes and rain-soaked clothing appeared against the marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Carlo guided her to a private elevator that required his fingerprint, leading directly to a penthouse where modern luxury merged seamlessly with old-world craftsmanship. "My security team has checked your background," he admitted, watching her reaction carefully. "You've been a nurse at Chicago Memorial for 7 years. Andrea's spine stiffened at his admission, the clinical assessment of her life without permission striking a nerve despite her professional composure. "And you've been what? Watching me since she died?" she challenged, finding courage in indignation as she faced the powerful stranger. Thunder rattled the floor-to-ceiling windows as Carlo moved to a sleek bar, pouring amber liquid into crystal glasses. "I didn't know you existed until today," he confessed, his voice carrying the weight of bitter discovery. Sophia kept many secrets. Her twin sister was apparently one of them. A soft sound interrupted their standoff, tiny footsteps pattering across hardwood floors as a small figure in pink pajamas appeared, rubbing sleepy eyes that widened in shocked recognition. The child froze, her teddy bear dropping from suddenly limp fingers as she whispered, "Mommy." Andrea's heart clenched painfully as the little girl stared at her with hope and confusion, Sophia's eyes looking back from a face that combined her sister's delicate features with Carlo's strong jawline. She knelt instinctively, medical training taking over as she sought words that wouldn't cause more trauma. Carlo moved swiftly to his daughter's side, placing protective hands on small shoulders as he explained in gentle tones, "This is your mommy's sister, Gina. They looked exactly the same because they were twins." His eyes met Andrea's over the child's head, silently pleading for cooperation. Gina looked between them with the penetrating insight only children possess, her small brow furrowing as she processed this new reality. "Like in my storybook about the princesses?" she asked, childish logic finding a framework for understanding as she cautiously approached her newfound aunt. Childhood instinct won over adult caution as Gina reached out to touch Andrea's rain-dampened hair, wonder replacing confusion in eyes too young to have witnessed so much loss. "Can you stay for pancakes?" she asked, the simple question bridging worlds divided by secrets and social barriers. Andrea glanced at Carlo, seeking permission she suddenly realized she needed in this unfamiliar territory. "I think we have a lot to talk about first," she answered honestly, unwilling to make promises to a child already scarred by abandoned expectations and maternal absence. Carlo nodded almost imperceptibly, gratitude flickering briefly across features schooled to reveal nothing. "It's past bedtime, princess," he reminded gently, his tone transforming completely when addressing his daughter. "Anna will tuck you in while we talk. Grown-up things." The nanny materialized as if summoned by thought alone, efficiently shepherding the reluctant child back to bed with practiced ease. Once alone, Carlo's demeanor shifted back to guarded intensity as he handed Andrea a photograph showing 2 identical women as teenagers, sisters separated by choice rather than circumstance. Andrea's fingers trembled as she traced her sister's teenage smile, memories flooding back of their last bitter argument, before Sophia disappeared from her life without explanation. "She left everything behind," she whispered, eyes lifting to meet Carlo's calculating gaze. "Why would she cut me out completely?" The storm outside intensified, mirroring the emotional tempest building within the penthouse as Carlo retrieved a leather-bound journal from a hidden wall safe. "She kept this," he explained, placing the diary between them like a bomb waiting to detonate. "I found it after the accident." Andrea hesitated before opening the journal, recognizing Sophia's elegant handwriting on pages filled with secrets never shared in life. The entries chronicled a carefully constructed existence, one where her sister had transformed from struggling nursing student to Mafia wife through a chance hospital encounter. Carlo paced restlessly as Andrea read, the powerful man suddenly vulnerable as their shared loss connected them across social divides. "She was working night shift in the emergency department," he explained, voice softening with memory. "I came in with a gunshot wound that couldn't involve police." Sophia's journal described her fear that night, followed by fascination with the dangerous man whose life she saved. A twisted fairy tale beginning that evolved into genuine love despite the violent world he inhabited. Andrea's tears spotted the pages as she discovered the sister she'd never truly known. "She tried to contact you," Carlo revealed, retrieving unopened letters addressed in Sophia's handwriting from the safe. "But returned mail and disconnected numbers convinced her you wanted nothing to do with her new life." His accusation hung in the air between them, unspoken but palpable. Andrea's hands shook as she examined postmarks from years when she'd been constantly relocating, following hospital residency assignments across the country while mourning a sister she believed had abandoned her. "I never received these," she whispered, grief and lost opportunity overwhelming her composure. The revelation that their estrangement had been circumstantial rather than intentional created a fragile connection between the unlikely pair, both victims of Sophia's unintended vanishing act. Carlo's expression softened momentarily, before professional caution reasserted itself in his rigid posture. "There's something else you should know," he said, retrieving hospital records from his desk drawer. "The accident that killed her wasn't random. It was meant for me." The clinical description of Sophia's injuries felt obscene to Andrea, her medical knowledge painting vivid images of her sister's final suffering. Carlo watched her reaction carefully, assessing her resilience as he gradually revealed the dangerous reality surrounding his family. "My enemies are constantly looking for leverage," he explained, his voice hardening with controlled rage. "Sophia kept you secret to protect you." Lightning illuminated the penthouse as Andrea processed this new understanding of her sister's choices: sacrifice disguised as abandonment, protection mistaken for rejection. "And now I've walked straight into your world," she realized aloud, new fear dawning in her eyes. Carlo nodded grimly, pouring himself another drink, as security personnel discreetly checked the perimeter of the luxurious apartment. "You were photographed getting into my car," he confirmed, technology revealing what the storm had concealed. "By morning, everyone will know you exist." The implications settled over Andrea like a physical weight. Years of medical training, insufficient preparation for entry into Chicago's criminal underworld. "What does this mean for me? For my job? My patients? My life?" she asked, practical concerns emerging through emotional overload. Carlo's answer was interrupted by his phone vibrating with urgent messages, his expression darkening as he scanned the screen. "It means we have less time than I thought," he stated flatly, signaling to his security team as he made rapid decisions. "You can't go back to your apartment tonight." Andrea wanted to protest but recognized the gravity in his expression, years of emergency room triage teaching her when situations required immediate action rather than discussion. "What about Gina?" she asked, maternal instinct focusing on the child caught in this dangerous reunion. Carlo's expression softened briefly at his daughter's name, before hardening into resolute determination. "You're a ghost from her mother's past, who shares her face," he said, making calculations only a man accustomed to constant threat could comprehend, "which makes you either the perfect protection or the perfect target." Andrea found herself whisked through Chicago's rain-slicked streets in an armored SUV by morning, her hospital shift covered by an anonymous donation to the administrator's charity. Sleep had evaded her in the penthouse's luxurious guest suite, her mind racing with implications of her newfound connection to the city's criminal elite. Carlo materialized in the doorway of the safe house, a deceptively modest brownstone with state-of-the-art security systems hidden behind vintage architecture. His tailored suit contrasted sharply with the casual clothes his men had procured for Andrea, the shopping tag still dangling from sleeves that perfectly fit her measurements. "Someone accessed your personnel files at the hospital this morning," he informed her, watching her expression carefully as he delivered news that transformed theoretical danger into concrete reality. The clinical precision in his voice reminded Andrea of doctors delivering terminal diagnoses, emotionally detached yet unmistakably grave. The safe house windows revealed a perfect view of Andrea's apartment building across the park, the strategic location suddenly obvious as Carlo handed her binoculars. Through powerful lenses, she observed two men in nondescript clothing, forcing her apartment door, their methodical movements betraying professional training rather than opportunistic burglary. Andrea's throat tightened as she watched strangers rifling through her modest possessions, the violation of her private space rendering theoretical danger viscerally real. "Who are they?" she whispered, medical training keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Carlo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he observed the intruders through his own binoculars, recognition flickering across features schooled to reveal nothing. "Santini family enforcers," he replied, naming rivals whose territory bordered his own. "They've been looking for leverage against me since the shipping route dispute." Andrea watched helplessly as the men discovered her nurse certification prominently displaying her full name and credentials, their animated conversation visible even without hearing their words. The photograph beside it, Andrea and Sophia as teenagers before life separated them, seemed to cause particular excitement as one man immediately made a phone call. "They'll connect you to me within hours," Carlo concluded, making rapid calculations only a man accustomed to constant threat assessment could comprehend. His phone buzzed with incoming intelligence, security teams reporting increased activity across rival territories throughout Chicago's underworld network. Andrea stepped away from the window, medical pragmatism asserting itself through the emotional turmoil of her shattered reality. "What about my patients?" she asked, professional dedication momentarily overshadowing personal safety. "I have post-surgical follow-ups and treatments scheduled all week." Carlo's expression softened momentarily, recognizing the same selfless dedication that had first drawn him to Sophia years earlier in a hospital emergency room. "Your patients have been reassigned to other nurses," he explained, technology and influence eliminating obstacles most people would find insurmountable. A soft knock interrupted their tense exchange, security personnel appearing with a tablet displaying surveillance footage of Andrea's hospital floor, the methodical search of her locker, the questioning of colleagues, the examination of her schedule, all executed by men whose casual clothes couldn't disguise their dangerous purpose. "They're thorough," Carlo acknowledged with grudging professional respect, tactical mind assessing opponents even as he formulated countermeasures to protect his unexpected new responsibility. The ghost of Sophia seemed to hover between them, her secrets creating danger neither could have anticipated. Andrea sank onto a leather sofa, nursing instincts cataloging her own symptoms of shock, as clinical detachment provided momentary refuge from overwhelming emotion. "Why would they care about me?" she asked, voicing the central question that transformed her from anonymous nurse to high-value target overnight. Carlo's answer was interrupted by another security alert, this time footage of men watching Gina's school, maintaining distance but clearly conducting surveillance of the building where his daughter attended kindergarten. His entire demeanor transformed instantly, the calculating businessman replaced by primal paternal ferocity. Andrea recognized the transformation, having witnessed similar reactions from parents when their children faced medical threats in her emergency room. "They're using her to draw you out," she realized aloud, medical training allowing her to analyze the tactical situation with surprising clarity. Carlo's response was immediate and comprehensive. Within 15 minutes, security teams had extracted Gina from her classroom under the guise of a family emergency, bypassing normal protocols with efficiency born of careful contingency planning. The child arrived at the safe house confused, but compliant, having practiced adventure drills as games throughout her young life. Gina's eyes widened with delighted surprise upon seeing Andrea, her child's perception noting only the miraculous appearance of her mother's face, rather than the tension electrifying the air around her. "You stayed!" she exclaimed, launching herself into startled arms with absolute trust that Andrea instinctively returned. Carlo observed their interaction with complex emotions flickering beneath his controlled expression, the strategic liability of Andrea's presence balanced against the rare joy illuminating his daughter's face. The decision crystallized in his eyes as Gina chattered excitedly about sharing her favorite toys with her new aunt. "We need to move you both to Montana," Carlo announced once Gina had been settled with educational activities in a secure playroom, the statement a command rather than suggestion, despite its conversational delivery. Maps appeared on computer screens displaying a remote property surrounded by extensive private land. Andrea bristled at the autocratic decision made without her input, professional independence warring with pragmatic recognition of her limited options. "I can't just disappear from my life," she protested, even as her medical training acknowledged the clear and present danger surrounding them all. Carlo's expression hardened into the mask that had earned him his reputation in Chicago's underworld, emotion yielding to calculated risk assessment and tactical planning. "You already have disappeared," he countered, displaying real-time footage of police at her apartment, responding to anonymous reports of gunshots. The staged crime scene unfolded with methodical precision on multiple screens. Evidence being planted, official reports manipulated, a narrative constructed that would make Andrea appear either victim or fugitive. "By tomorrow, you'll either be presumed dead or wanted for questioning," Carlo explained, the clinical detachment in his voice failing to disguise underlying urgency. Andrea watched her carefully constructed life dismantled with surgical precision, years of professional dedication and personal struggle rendered meaningless in hours. "And if I refuse?" she challenged, needing to assert some control, even as she recognized the futility of resistance against forces beyond her comprehension. The answer came not from Carlo but from the secure playroom, where Gina had fallen asleep clutching both her teddy bear and a framed photograph of Sophia she'd retrieved from her backpack. The child's peaceful expression contrasted sharply with the danger surrounding her, innocence preserved through deliberate ignorance of the violent world financing her privileged existence. "She hasn't slept through the night since Sophia died," Carlo observed softly, vulnerability briefly visible through the armor of his customary detachment. The unspoken implication hung between them. Gina responded to Andrea in ways that transcended logical explanation, finding comfort in the genetic miracle of her aunt's identical appearance. Andrea's medical training recognized the psychological implications, the child's grief finding unexpected healing through this genetic coincidence that offered neither explanation nor apology. "I can't replace Sophia," she warned, unwilling to create new trauma through false expectations or temporary connection. Carlo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, years of negotiation experience recognizing the unspoken conditions behind her statement. "I'm not asking you to replace her," he clarified, tactical mind already formulating contingency plans. "I'm asking you to help protect what she loved most." The manipulation was masterful yet transparent, appealing simultaneously to Andrea's professional compassion, newfound family connection, and basic survival instinct. "For how long?" she asked, the question acknowledging implicit acceptance even as she sought to establish some boundary in this forced alliance. Carlo's phone buzzed with another security alert, his expression darkening as he viewed footage of additional Santini enforcers establishing surveillance positions around the hospital administrator's home. "Until I eliminate the threat," he answered, the euphemism failing to disguise the violent reality of his intended solution. Andrea's emergency room experience translated his meaning instantly, years of treating gunshot victims providing graphic understanding of what eliminating threats entailed in Carlo's world. "I won't be part of violence," she stated firmly, ethical boundaries asserting themselves despite her compromised position. The Montana ranch materialized from mountain fog as their helicopter descended, the sprawling property's isolation, both comforting and intimidating to Andrea's urban sensibilities. Log buildings nestled against forest edges appeared deceptively rustic, their traditional architecture concealing security technology that would make military installations envious. Gina's excitement proved contagious as she pulled Andrea through rooms filled with Western warmth, handcrafted furniture, woolen throws, and stone fireplaces creating atmosphere that belied the property's defensive capabilities. "This is where we come when Daddy needs quiet," she explained, childhood perception identifying emotional rather than tactical motivations. Carlo observed their tour from doorways, his customary suit exchanged for casual clothing that failed to diminish his authoritative presence. The softening in his expression when watching his daughter remained carefully controlled, vulnerability permitted only in fleeting moments between strategic assessments. Andrea unpacked the hastily gathered belongings Carlo's team had provided, designer labels and perfect sizing, reminding her how thoroughly her privacy had been compromised even before their cemetery meeting. The bedroom's windows revealed breathtaking mountain vistas that felt surreal compared to Chicago's urban landscape, beauty and danger coexisting in uncomfortable proximity. Security personnel maintained discreet presence throughout the property, their weapons concealed but accessible as they patrolled boundaries and monitored surveillance equipment with professional vigilance. Andrea's medical training recognized their focused alertness, similar to surgical teams prepared for sudden complications during high-risk procedures. Carlo joined Andrea on the porch that evening after Gina's bedtime, mountain silence emphasizing the gravity of their conversation as he handed her a secure tablet. "Chicago police found blood matching your type in your apartment," he informed her, displaying news reports declaring her missing and potentially injured. Andrea's stomach tightened as she viewed photographs of concerned colleagues being interviewed, their genuine worry manipulated into narratives serving Santini objectives. "They're using my disappearance to draw you out," she realized, tactical understanding, developing alongside growing familiarity with criminal methodology. The night wind carried hints of approaching winter, as Carlo acknowledged her assessment with slight nod, respect reluctantly entering his evaluation of this woman who shared his wife's face, but possessed entirely different strengths. "They've offered to exchange information about your location for concessions in the harbor dispute," he confirmed, business and violence inseparably intertwined in his world. Andrea's nursing experience with trauma victims provided unexpected insight into the psychological warfare unfolding around her. Manipulation techniques similar whether employed by abusers or criminal organizations. "They don't actually know where I am," she deduced, recognizing the bluff designed to reveal Carlo's priorities and pressure points. Carlo's expression remained carefully neutral despite evident surprise at her accurate assessment, tactical thinking typically reserved for his inner circle, rather than civilian outsiders. Their surveillance teams lost us during the hospital transfer, he confirmed. Competent enemies thwarted by superior planning and resources. Montana's stars emerged with startling clarity as night deepened around them, the vast cosmic display emphasizing human insignificance compared to forces beyond their control. What happens when they realize I've disappeared with you? Andrea asked, practical nursing assessment requiring worst-case scenario planning. The answer materialized in howling sirens and flashing lights appearing on the distant access road, local law enforcement approaching with urgency that immediately activated defensive protocols throughout the ranch. Carlo's transformation from conversational to commanding happened between heartbeats. Security teams deploying with practiced efficiency, responding to predetermined signals. Andrea found herself shepherded into a hidden panic room with Gina, the child's sleepy confusion requiring immediate medical reassurance despite Andrea's own pounding heart. It's just like hide and seek, she explained, nursing skills automatically prioritizing the vulnerable patient, despite her personal fear. Gina curled trustingly against Andrea as security monitors displayed tactical teams surrounding the property, their coordinated movements revealing professional training rather than local police procedure. Those aren't real police, Andrea whispered, recognition dawning as patterns from Chicago surveillance footage repeated in Montana's remote landscape. Carlo's voice emerged from hidden speakers, tactical commands directing ranch security while simultaneously reassuring his daughter and her protector. They found us faster than anticipated, he acknowledged, grudging professional respect evident despite the danger. The helicopter pilot must have been compromised. I'll rewrite chapters 7, 8, and 9 with a mix of both 3-line and 4-line paragraphs to match your examples. The panic room transformed into command central as hours passed, sophisticated equipment allowing Carlo to coordinate counteroffensive measures, while Andrea kept Gina occupied with improvised games. Dawn revealed the aftermath, Santini men retreating with casualties, ranch security establishing expanded perimeter control. Andrea emerged from protective confinement with medical instincts, immediately assessing the wounded security personnel, emergency room experience translating seamlessly to field triage. Her calm efficiency impressed even Carlo's most hardened men, respect entering their eyes as she stabilized injuries that would have proven fatal without intervention. Gina watched Andrea with wide-eyed admiration, the child's perception identifying compassionate strength where adults saw only clinical technique. You fix people like Mommy did, she observed, creating unexpected emotional connection. Carlo observed their interaction from the doorway, complex emotions flickering beneath his controlled expression. Professional assessment acknowledged Andrea's value beyond her genetic coincidence. Tactical asset evolving into human connection despite his careful emotional barriers. The mountain forest surrounding them provided natural security as Andrea hiked with Gina later that day, ranch boundaries invisibly guarded by men whose presence remained deliberately unobtrusive. Childhood wonder proved contagious as tiny hands collected colorful treasures. Carlo joined them at a stream crossing, his customary vigilance momentarily softened by mountain serenity. You're good with her, he acknowledged, rare compliment revealing more than intended as he helped Andrea navigate slippery stones. Physical contact between them, brief, unintentional, yet electric, created momentary awareness transcending their complicated circumstances. Andrea withdrew her hand quickly, professional boundaries reasserting themselves despite the confusing emotional undercurrent. Gina's innocent question shattered their awkward silence, childhood directness cutting through adult complexity. Are you going to be my new mommy? She asked Andrea, hope illuminating features that combined Carlo's strength with Sophia's delicate beauty. Andrea knelt beside the child, medical training providing framework for honest communication. I'm your aunt, she explained gently, refusing to create false expectations despite the yearning evident in Gina's expression. I'm your mommy's sister who will always care about you. Carlo watched their interaction with vulnerability briefly visible through his customary armor. The ghost of Sophia seemed to hover among the mountain pines, her absence creating connection between the living she'd left behind. Night fell with increased security measures implemented throughout the property, technical equipment detecting approaching vehicles long before visible range. Andrea found herself standing beside Carlo at the window, their shared concern for Gina creating temporary alliance. The moonlight carved silver patterns across Carlo's profile as he studied tactical displays, highlighting features Sophia had once traced with loving fingers. Why did you marry her? Andrea asked suddenly, medical directness seeking understanding beyond security protocols. Carlo's expression softened with memory. tactical mask momentarily replaced by genuine emotion. "She saw me," he answered simply, the phrase containing complexities words couldn't adequately express. Not the reputation or the power, just me. The revelation created surprising intimacy between them. Vulnerability more significant than physical attraction, informing connection neither had sought. Andrea recognized the dangerous territory their conversation approached, professional boundaries essential despite the emotional undertow. Thunder rolled across mountain peaks as storm clouds gathered above the ranch, nature's dramatic backdrop emphasizing the emotional turbulence neither could safely acknowledge. Carlo moved closer. As lightning illuminated the room, his voice lowered to prevent awakening his sleeping daughter. Morning brought unexpected calm, storm clouds retreating beyond distant peaks, security reports indicating no immediate threats approaching their mountain sanctuary. Andrea discovered Carlo in his study surrounded by computer screens displaying Chicago surveillance feeds. Weeks had transformed their relationship from reluctant association to complicated partnership, shared responsibility for Gina-creating bonds neither had anticipated. Andrea's medical knowledge proved invaluable during security planning, her emergency experience identifying vulnerabilities, traditional assessment overlooked. Carlo's rare smile appeared as Andrea entered with coffee. Momentary warmth reserved almost exclusively for his daughter, now occasionally extended to this woman who'd earned grudging respect. The dangerous attraction between them remained carefully unacknowledged, professional boundaries maintained. Gina's artwork covered the refrigerator door, crayon drawings depicting 3 figures together against mountain backdrops, the child's perception creating family from circumstances neither adult had anticipated. Andrea studied these illustrations with complex emotions, surrogate role both fulfilling and frightening. Chicago news feeds displayed ongoing investigation into Andrea's disappearance, hospital colleagues expressing concern while police sources hinted at foul play. The narrative constructed by Santini operatives continued developing, pressure building on Carlo's Chicago operations through manipulation of public perception. Andrea recognized tactical genius behind their enemy's approach, utilizing legitimate law enforcement resources rather than direct confrontation. "They're smarter than you expected," she observed. Nursing assessment identifying patient deterioration in Chicago's situation despite Montana's apparent security. Carlo's expression acknowledged her accurate assessment, respect replacing initial dismissal of her tactical understanding. "They've targeted specific businesses, one Sophia helped establish," he confirmed, revealing connection between his murdered wife and legitimate enterprises now under investigation. Andrea suddenly understood more clearly. Not just Sophia's death, but her life had been deliberately targeted. "She was helping you go legitimate," Andrea realized aloud, journal entries suddenly forming coherent pattern beyond her initial comprehension. Mountain silence emphasized the significance of this revelation as Carlo nodded, vulnerability momentarily visible. 5 years of careful planning, creating legitimate businesses, establishing legal resource chains, building political connections through charitable foundations, he confirmed. Andrea approached the tactical displays, medical analysis identifying patterns in the targeted businesses, all connected to healthcare services and medical technology development. She was using her nursing background, she whispered, discovering her sister's hidden legacy. The revelation created unexpected connection, as Carlo displayed financial records showing Sophia's influence, clinics serving underprivileged communities, nursing scholarship foundations. She was creating her own redemption, he explained, pride evident despite the tactical vulnerability her efforts had created. Andrea studied these records with growing understanding of her sister's complex choices. Separation from family enabling transformation that couldn't have occurred within ethical boundaries of traditional nursing. And the Santini family doesn't want legitimacy, she deduced. Carlo's expression darkened as he displayed intercepted communications between rival family members, their strategy explicitly targeting legitimate businesses as points of vulnerability. "They're forcing me back toward traditional operations," he confirmed, the euphemism failing to disguise criminal activities. Security alerts interrupted their conversation, Montana sheriff's vehicles approaching the property with official notifications rather than tactical threat. Carlo reviewed surveillance footage of approaching officers, their procedures indicating legitimate law enforcement. Andrea recognized the critical moment, weeks of planning culminating in decision point that would determine Carlo's future direction. "What will you choose?" she asked softly, the question encompassing business strategy, personal ethics, and Gina's future simultaneously. The Chicago courthouse stood imposingly against winter sky, Andrea's testimony about hospital corruption, creating headlines across medical industries nationwide. 3 months had transformed her from missing nurse to federal witness, her evidence dismantling Santini family infiltration of healthcare systems. Carlo watched from secure video feed in Montana, his daughter beside him as Andrea answered questions with professional precision. Tactical sacrifice of certain business interests had preserved core operations Sofia had established. Strategic retreat enabling long-term transformation. Gina's hand remained trustingly within her father's grasp as they observed the woman who had become integral to their disrupted lives. "Is Aunt Andrea coming home soon?" she asked, concept of home evolving to include this woman who shared her mother's face. Montana ranch security had evolved from tactical necessity to comfortable routine. Andrea's medical clinic serving local ranchers, establishing legitimate community presence. Her nursing skills found unexpected fulfillment in rural healthcare. Emergency experience perfectly suited to the region. Carlo's business transformation accelerated under Andrea's influence, healthcare enterprises expanding through legitimate channels, while traditional operations gradually converted toward legal frameworks. Their partnership evolved beyond protective necessity into shared vision. The local sheriff, initially suspicious of the newcomers, had become an unexpected ally after Andrea saved his daughter during a severe allergic reaction, her emergency skills bridging social divides that money and power could not. Community acceptance transformed their mountain refuge from hideout to home, Carlo's security team gradually blending into local life through genuine connection. Sofia's journal entries revealed a detailed 5-year plan for complete legitimacy, ambitious timelines and business models that Andrea had begun implementing with modifications reflecting her own medical expertise. Chicago authorities, guided by careful anonymous tips, had systematically dismantled Santini operations without revealing Carlo's involvement, creating power vacuum that legitimate businesses quickly filled. Spring arrived with mountain wildflowers replacing winter snow, natural beauty emphasizing renewal possibilities that extended beyond seasonal change. Andrea found Carlo in Sofia's garden, space his wife had designed but never seen completed, perennial bulbs emerging with colorful promise. Physical proximity between them no longer carried awkward tension, comfortable silence replacing tactical vigilance. "She would have loved this," Andrea observed softly. Connection to her sister strengthened through months understanding the woman Sofia had become. Carlo nodded, vulnerability now occasionally permitted in Andrea's presence, as trust replaced suspicion. "She planned everything, even the colors emerging in specific sequence," he explained. Appreciation for detail reflecting respect beyond romantic memory into genuine admiration. Gina's delighted voice interrupted their shared moment as she discovered first butterfly of season hovering above emerging flowers. The child ran toward them clutching carefully gathered wildflower bouquet, family creation occurring through shared experience rather than biological connection. Andrea accepted these flowers with genuine appreciation, nurse's hands that had saved lives during Montana winter, now gently preserving child's gift. The medical professional had discovered unexpected fulfillment in this mountain sanctuary, purpose extending beyond career. Carlo's expression as he watched their interaction revealed transformation beyond tactical alliance into emotional investment he'd believed impossible after Sofia's death. The powerful man had discovered vulnerability could become strength rather than weakness when shared with appropriate trust. Andrea recognized the unspoken question in his eyes as Gina skipped ahead toward Butterfly Gardens, their complicated relationship approaching crossroads requiring definition. "I'm not replacing her," she stated firmly, honesty essential despite growing feelings. Carlo's response revealed emotional evolution matching his business transformation, understanding transcending superficial resemblance between identical twins. "I know who you are," he replied simply, appreciation for her unique strengths evident in his measured words. The cemetery where they had first met now held different significance as they visited together, Sofia's grave receiving flowers from 3 hands rather than separate grieving individuals. Andrea knelt beside her sister's headstone, forgiveness replacing resentment as understanding transformed previous judgments. Carlo stood protectively beside them, tactical awareness never entirely absent despite emotional evolution. The unlikely family they had formed from tragedy and danger remained his primary concern, protection extending beyond physical security into emotional well-being. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where in the world you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because your support is what allows me to continue creating these stories for you.